Good evening. It is 5:33 on Wednesday, June 11th, 2014. It is the monthly meeting of the Urbana Human Relations Commission. Could we please have a roll call?
Francis Rigberg Baker,
Here.
Kevin Bowersox Johnson,
Here.
Daniel Larson,
Here.
Lisa Mosley,
Here.
Peter Resnick,
Here.
Aisha Lam Sobe, and Rizwan Udine.
Thank you. Looking at the agenda, are there any additions, edits that need to be made? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Thank you. Looking at our minutes from last month's meeting on May 14th, are there any additions, edits, corrections that need to be made?
Move approval of the minutes.
I second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Public participation? Seeing none, we can move on. Todd, we've got some old business to tend to. So I'll
Sure.
turn it over to you.
After the discussion that we had last meeting, we've taken another look at the vehicle for hire, the motion in support of the vehicle for hire ordinance findings. And so in front of you, you should have the original October 9th memo that was published by my office. You should also have a clean copy of the revised motion, as well as a copy showing all of the edits that were discussed at the last meeting, and with the help of Commissioner Resnick, sort of incorporated into the document. So I'm happy to take any questions that you may have, any concerns about the document.
I guess I have a question.
Fran, please.
In the final, therefore, the expression "or minimize to the extent practicable." I'm not familiar with that. Is that a term of art or something that?
To the extent that it can be within the limitations of an organization or a policy or a whatever operational constraints that there may be.
Is that cleared up?
I'm not sure what sort of thing that refers to, what that would be referred to.
For instance, there is probably a limitation to the amount that you can minimize a particular effect in terms of sort of the law, the effect of discrimination. That's limited by your enforcement constraints. It's limited by other laws that may be controlling, by, for instance, federal law and the federal framework and how they are actually interpreting the different things that we're able to do at the local level, state laws and home rule laws, that type of thing.
Thank you. That does help. Thanks.
I mean, you could certainly say within the constraint of other laws, but then you have to name off not just the laws, but other types of constraints that could, sir.
And I think it's the disparate impact that's the main thing that they've got to minimize to the extent practical.
Oh, yes.
There's going to be upper limits. I mean, we can ask them to eliminate disparate treatment of people with prior convictions. I think we are unlikely to get them to do that completely, and there might be perfectly good reasons for them not to. But I think the minimizing is definitely having to do with the disparate impact part of it.
Are there any other questions or comments on this latest draft? If not, is there a motion on the floor?
I'm glad to make a motion to, as stated in the written document before you.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. One last chance for any discussion.
And
Any questions?
I'll just say that I think this captures what we've been talking about. My intention, it's the way it's written, it captures everything, and it's therefore a bit dense. My intention is to, assuming it's on the agenda for this coming Monday's city council meeting, to no, it's not going to make it until the next one.
Would not anticipate that.
But whichever one it ends up on, my intention is to go down and helpfully explain and present. It's especially the bits about disparate impact and disparate treatment and how those are different, and explaining why it is that we're not telling them precisely what to do, and they can rely on Todd's judgment or recommendations, but that we're telling them how they should not discriminate and no further.
Great. All right. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Great. Thank you, Todd. And sorry it took so long, but thank you and Peter for all your efforts on this
Thank you.
initiative. All right. We're moving on to, we have a specific EEO compliance review to discuss, I believe.
Right, so this is A&R contractors and A&R services. I had an opportunity to speak with a representative from A&R mechanical contractors. And what happens, my understanding is that the service that they provide us, they actually come out and do repairs, different types of equipment repairs in the building. That is the actual mechanical contractors. A&R Services is basically a construction contractor. I think they do a lot of horizontal construction. So there are times periodically where we will hire them to handle major road construction, excavation, that type of thing. My understanding is currently there are no contracts with A&R Services, the contractors, or sorry, the construction sort of arm of it. In terms of A&R mechanical contractors, I looked over the course of the last year, and we did about right around $6,500 of contracting with them. That tends to fall well under our threshold of, for a service contractor, I think it's at $30,000. And so, you know, there are a couple of ways that we can go about this. The other thing that may help clarify is that the mechanical contractors, the people who come out and do repairs, they employ administrative staff who also provide administrative support for services, for the A&R services. So it's almost like an umbrella organization, but they are separate businesses in that they have separate tax identification numbers. They are legally separate entities. It's just one is providing administrative support and services for the other. There are a couple of ways I think that we can approach this that I've discussed with Commissioner Resnick. One way would be to review them. They've submitted letters basically explaining their difficulty in recruiting and minority recruitment. They also sent me today the letters that they've sent out to the unions requesting specifically minority assignments from unions. And basically their reasoning is that, particularly with A&R Services, 100% of their workforce is basically obtained, or they get it from the union, and they get who the union is giving them. And so their position is that they don't have as much control as they would need to in order to really push those EEO numbers, other than sending a letter saying, please send us candidates that will help us attain these EEO goals. And so looking at both of them, we could obviously take them separately. If we look at them sort of the same, we have discussed giving both of them 6-month provisional certifications and then going back and doing further work into looking at the union and really doing some investigating to find out what's going on at the union, that there aren't more available minority candidates that are coming out of the union. We can hold for another month. I don't think that there will be any major disruption of services, since A&R contractors does not necessarily meet our threshold, or did not for the last 12 months, and there are no pending contracts with A&R Services. So there are a couple of different alternatives that you have. My office has no recommendations one way or the other. I think maybe the most useful thing to do may be to, no matter what, to initiate some fact-finding with the union and try and figure out what's going on there.
Yeah, the unions came up like 2 years ago. Does that
Yeah,
sound about
and-
right?
And we've done some initial, we've done some inquiry before.
Yeah.
And the feedback that we've gotten is that, as the unions have told us, look, we've set up apprenticeship programs, we're working with Parkland College. We've actually donated time and money and resources to Parkland, to their apprenticeship programs, some of which are aimed at minority candidates, basically trying to get more minorities into the trades. They haven't necessarily been those efforts have not seen much of an increase in minority participation. But we can look at that again, and we can look further into it and do some more inquiry to make sure that that's still happening, that those good faith efforts are still being made. And there are additional requirements too. For instance, there are requirements, as Commissioner Resnick has pointed out, that they submit an affirmative action plan, that the union submit an affirmative action plan. So there are other things that the ordinance requires, the administrative code requires, that the commission can, at this point, request and ask be submitted. And we can see what comes of that. But I'll sort of let you all discuss now and let me know what you want to do.
Fran, do you have a question or comment?
Thank you.
Oh, I was just wondering what unions are involved in this, please.
So my understanding from A&R submissions is that they're dealing with Local 149, which is the pipe fitters, plumbing and pipe fitters. So I sort of want to, I would be inclined to split this question into two parts. What to do about A&R in particular, and then how to deal with the union. Because the way that the section 2119, which is the contractor bit, is laid out, what it says is that the city will not contract with anybody who doesn't do this set of things, supply us numbers and et cetera and so forth, and we will not contract with anyone who doesn't ask of their union to do the same thing. To go down that path to decertify A&R because the union hasn't provided us with enough information, I think is pulling a pin on a grenade that we don't need to go down just yet. I think we want to find out the information and figure out what's going on and see how we can help before we start getting very formal. On the other hand, with regard to A&R specifically, I think I'd be inclined, Todd, if you can find out the information. The numbers that they give for each, the services and the contractors, are strange. The contractors, which we believe we don't have contracts with, lists 83 craft workers.
No, that would be the services.
That I don't.
So
No, that's contract. That's contractors.
No, I mean, the services are the ones that we currently don't have ongoing contracts with, according to their expectations.
So services, well, okay, because services list the major activity as site utilities and excavation. Contractors list the major activities as plumbing, heating, and ventilation.
All right.
One of the things I guess I'd like to get straight is which folks from those lists are union folks and which folks are regular staff who are not union, and sort of split out those numbers so that we can see which things are attributable to A&R themselves and which things are attributable to the union, and hopefully, the numbers that we're talking about are correct, that the vast majority are union folks, and that's the only thing to deal with, at which point, I think separately with the union, I think having them send us some numbers the same way that a contractor would, start to ask those questions. What kind of numbers are we talking about? How many folks are in the union? Do you collect data on race, on ethnic background, on gender, et cetera? And start to look at their affirmative action policies, their equal opportunity policies, what they're doing by way of hiring. So do those two things separately. Since there's nothing pending with A&R, I'd sort of be inclined to postpone the decision on A&R by a month, get more information on who is union and who is not. And that'll sort of, because if we find that one of them that we're contracting with does have a whole population of non-union employees and the numbers are still terrible, we might want to have a slightly different conversation with A&R or have Todd have that conversation with A&R. If they're a really tiny proportion of non-union folks, we might want to say, you know what, let's certify A&R for 2 years and deal with the union separately. So I think getting those numbers would be helpful. And then having Todd start to talk to the union about getting information from them that we can work with, I think would be useful.
So you just table till next month?
I'd say table A&R till next month, see if Todd can get a further breakdown from them about who's union, who's not, what contracts we have coming up with them or have in the past, so we can get an idea of which one we're dealing with. And maybe if services is who is not getting the contracts with us, maybe we can just put them aside and not have to approve them or deal with it at all, but just take a look at the contractors and figure out from there. And then the union thing put on the agenda for next month as review of
And
EEO
services-
information from them.
And services almost are at our threshold, they're at 20, you know.
Exactly, they're really, what are they,
23 this year, 21 last year.
right,
So that's about, was 20 usually?
what is our cutoff? What is it?
15.
It's 50,
15,
okay.
so they're just over.
Okay.
But if they're not, if they don't have a contract with the city,
Yes.
there's nothing to approve anyway,
Yeah.
so. It was weird because the A&R stuff, the stuff they submitted for services also had the letter that said, many of our employees are from Local 149, which says to me they just kind of bundled it all and didn't actually separate out which was the services stuff and which was the contractor stuff.
Right,
So-
and actually, one of the questions I had from them is does it really make sense to think of these as two separate entities? And that's where I received the explanation that they really do provide much different services, they're legally separate, that
So
explanation.
probably getting subdivision of which employees are which would help us figure out what's going on.
So is that a motion we need to approve, or?
I think as long as everyone, from a consent standpoint, or there's a consensus, I think
Is everyone
that's fine.
comfortable with maybe just holding off on this until our July meeting?
That would be fine.
Okay. Is that okay, Todd?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes.
We have no new business, so let's jump to staff report.
So let's start with the approval of the EEO workforce, the new ones that we have. We apologize for you all getting these late. We got them late. And generally, if we get them on the day of, we try to get them out to you. It's always up to you if you want to pass on them and consider them for another month. We at least want to get them in front of you.
No need to apologize. So it looks like we have 8 to consider. We have 3 companies that have 3, 5, and 7 employees,
Yeah, and one at 15.
and 1 at 13, excuse me,
And one at 15.
and 1 at 15. You want to maybe separate them out?
Looks like it's all fire department stuff.
Yeah. And then come back to the other 3. And I don't mean to jump ahead. Are there any questions for Todd or comments? Or can we handle it all in one motion?
What does Darley, WS Darley do? What is the contract for? And by the way, where is Itasca and what does that mean?
Right.
Where is Itasca, Illinois?
Yeah, is it Chicago suburb?
I don't think so. I think it's more southern. I'll look that up. I think they're fire, or Tony's saying that they're fire, and I think he's correct.
Yeah, they provide services to the fire department.
Where are you?
There's a lot of little towns in here.
DuPage County.
So it
It's
is
a 708 area code.
not far from Elk Grove Village, sort of between, south of Elk Grove, north of Bloomingdale. So, yeah, DuPage.
Okay, and racial makeup of the village, last census was 88% white, 1.7% African American, 0.26 Native American, 5.83 Asian, 0.02 Pacific Islander, 1.72 other.
And they're sitting at 9% minority.
12%. 12% minority, 88% white.
Here in their company is at
No, I'm
9%.
sorry,
Darley,
Composition.
WS Darley has 9%.
Oh, and they are at 9%.
And the one thing I'd point out about that Chicagoland area is those borders are really, really porous. And so if you're thinking about looking at a specific locality, it may do better just to think about the whole county. And
That's what I was thinking.
DuPage is a little bit more diverse than that, I
That's what
think.
I was thinking too. Yeah, you don't have to live there to work there.
I think that.
But
that's why it's
even
a
with that,
1 year.
9% seems pretty,
That's why your recommendation is 1 year,
yeah.
I would assume.
Yeah, racial makeup of DuPage in its entirety is 84% white.
Yeah.
Chris mentioned too that
And only 3% African American.
So they've hit, they have 3% of their workforce is African American.
And they've got 9% Hispanic or Latino.
They've got 3% here.
For whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
And again, one other thing you want to be careful about is the demographic information is helpful in terms of their population demographics. That probably is going to be slightly different than their available workforce demographic.
Of course. Are there?
What was their
any-
services?
Sorry,
Sorry, what were their services? Fire was correct?
Yeah, they're providing, they're a fire vendor, and I think most of these are right now planning on bidding on the provision of fire equipment and fire services to us,
Oh, okay.
or at least a few of these are. Okay, yeah, rescue equipment, sort of fire rescue equipment.
Unless someone wants to do differently, I'm happy to make a motion for the whole bunch.
Sounds good.
All right. So, move that we approve the following vendors. Alexis Fire Equipment for 2 years, Banner Fire Equipment for 2 years, WS Darley and Company for 1 year, EMC Genesis Rescue Systems for 6 months, Diggett of Champaign for 2 years, Central Equipment Solutions for 2 years, Owens Excavation and Trucking for 2 years, and Sentinel Emergency Solutions for 6 months, all as per staff recommendations. So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any final discussion or question? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Yeah. All right, Ty, what do we got on our HRO activity report?
Okay, looking at the substantial contacts report, which is the long table, the very top says monthly complaint activity report, but if you look at the bottom, it says June 2014 substantial contacts report. You can see that in the month of May, I think our cutoff is right at that public accommodations case. So we've had another inquiry about employment. An individual felt that they were being sexually harassed and retaliated against. They were not in our jurisdiction, so they were referred off to the IDHR. We actually helped them file. There was a public accommodations case with an individual who had a disability. There's no jurisdiction there. We helped them file with the Illinois Department of Human Rights. I think that was a county. It was out in the county. And then finally, we had a housing case. There was no particular protected class that we could identify that was relevant to the decision that was made. I mean, everyone could be a protected class at some point in time, but there was nothing to identify that was relevant to the decision that was made, and thus there was no jurisdiction either way around. Any questions on those three? And again, these are contacts that people make with our office, either by phone or walk-in, where they have a question about filing a discrimination complaint or some issue with discrimination that they're seeking to have resolved. Oftentimes, they can result in us referring them on to IDHR. Sometimes we refer them on to the City of Champaign where appropriate. Other times, we help them try and get it resolved, even sometimes when they're out of our jurisdiction. And other times, we file complaints because they're appropriately within our jurisdiction. All right, but these are more than just a random call that is 2 minutes long. These are, we're spending some time with these individuals trying to get them situated. Any questions on that? All right, now looking at our case status, UC 130101 is a race case. We're still waiting on contact from the actual complainant. UC 130709 is also a race case. We've sent off the second information request. That request is due to us, I believe, next week.
To the respondent?
To us.
No, I'm sorry. The second information request.
Yes,
The second
we sent
information
off
request was sent to the respondent.
Yes, and it's due back to us, I believe, next week. And what happens there is we go out and do a fact-finding meeting, and there are several issues that arise during the fact-finding meeting that need clarification. And so we send off a written request for that clarifying information prior to making a final determination, or prior to at least concluding the investigation. UC 131010 is a complaint based upon prior conviction. Again, we're still waiting on information from the complainant. In this case, we need to verify the conviction and the location of the conviction, the date of the conviction, and the type of conviction that it was. And at this point, it's on the complainant to provide that information, because we're not even certain. The county have tried and have not been successful. So once I have that, we'll be able to take a look at the case a little bit more carefully to determine whether or not there was any violation. In UC 1402-01, we have received a response, or an initial response, and currently I'm drafting the first request for information, which will generally request personnel records and the personnel records of anyone who the complainant believes that they might be a comparator with, and their general practices and policies and that type of thing. UC 1405-04, we're waiting on an initial response. It's a public accommodations case. Any questions on those? And I also want to note the case that we had scheduled for a hearing that was ultimately continued and vacated. I still need to get in touch with Mr. Jackson to get a final order entered. The settlement is completed. I just need to get the final order entered, and I have not contacted Mr. Jackson to do so, so that's on me. Any questions regarding this?
Nope.
No changes to the budget since last meeting, although I'd like you to note that there was a $3,000 expenditure before that for the mediator that we brought in on that particular case. Any questions? Any at all?
No, you have it under control, Todd.
As always. Alrighty, we're about to wrap up, but we are excited to welcome the newest member of the Urbana Human Relations Commission. That is Kevin Bowersox Johnson. Kevin, hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
We always ask new members to first sing their favorite, no. Just to tell us a little bit.
You don't want
Singing
that,
is
trust me.
No, we've all-
This would be my first and last meeting.
No, sorry. We would just love for you to just introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself.
All right, well, I'm Kevin Bowersox Johnson. I was born and raised right here in the Urbana area. I have a husband of 12 years, a 7-year-old in the school district, and about 5 years ago, I started the Epicenter of Champaign County, the local community center serving the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning community. And I'm really excited to be a part of the board. Commission.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Any other announcements? Then we are adjourned.